Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an interview with Shabana Azmi. Shabana Azmi, let's talk a little bit more focused about Indian Muslims. They are amongst the poorest, the least educated, the worst represented communities in India. Has Indian politics been unfair to Indian Muslims?
Yes.
And is it individual politicians you blame, the system, or parties?
I think there isn't enough understanding of the fact that in a democracy, how you treat the security of the minority must be a very important part of the success of a democracy. You can't only make token gestures and actually let them be in the state that they are, as the Rajinder Sachar committee report shows. So what happens is token gestures are made, but the real issues are never addressed.
In fact, would you go a step further? Would you say that Muslims are in fact victims of discrimination? Despite India's proud claim of being secular,
Karan,
they still
I
face
can't get
prejudice.
a house in Bombay. I wanted to buy a flat in Bombay, and it wasn't given to me because I was a Muslim. I've read the same thing about Saif. Now, I mean, if Javed Akhtar and Shabana Azmi cannot get a flat in Bombay because they are Muslims, what are we talking about?
Do Indians understand, particularly those who aren't Muslims, the extent of problems that we've created through this prejudice for the 14-15% Muslim minority? Do you think people understand this?
Yeah, yes and no. And when they don't, I also think it's about time that Indian Muslims stopped viewing themselves as victims. I think we also tend to get into
But
that
what can they do?
Victim mode. Firstly, you have to look at your own community. You have to build reforms within it. You have to say, all right, we have to look into things like education. But what happens is riot after riot after riot, the guilty get away scot-free. So the feeling that is left behind is that there are two kinds of laws in this country. If you kill one person, you're likely to be hung. If you indulge in mass murder, an amnesty of sorts will be granted to you. This leads to ghettoization, this leads to marginalization, this leads to a lot of despair. Until we can actually understand that the guilty must be punished, whoever they are, we can never talk about integration.
How much resentment does all of this cause in the hearts of Muslims who see themselves as Indian and yet also realize they're not being given a fair deal?
No, but I think it's not only time for resentment, because we
But there is
also
resentment?
have... There is resentment in certain sections which is fanned even more by the fundamentalists. The average Muslim really just wants roti, kapda or makan, as the average Hindu, as the average
But that he doesn't
Christian.
get.
He doesn't get.
Because
Magar
politicians don't think of that.
Politicians don't think about it. The community is also allowing itself to listen to the fundamentalists who actually are not their leaders at all.
To what extent is the community entrapped by what are often described as bad leaders, fundamentalists who provoke them rather than lead them forward?
But I think there is a change that is happening. What has happened is for far too long, the moderate liberal Muslim hasn't really got involved with the affairs of the community. Because after partition, it was seen as being sort of communal to do so. But I think post Babri Masjid demolition, the moderate liberal has come forward to the affairs, for the affairs of the community, and that has led to a great strengthening of confidence amongst the Muslims.
Let's try and look to the future. At the UP elections, the Shahi Imam formed a Muslim front to contest them. Earlier in Assam, Badruddin Ajmal formed a Muslim front to contest the Assam elections. Do Muslims need their own political party?
No. Jawaharlal Nehru was a leader of Muslims, and that's the way it should be. You don't need a Muslim leader for that.
Do Muslims need to merge more effectively and more aggressively with the mainstream then?
You see, poor things. They're being pulled over the coals all the time for some stupid statement which is made by some extremist, and because that catches the attention of the press, you have all Muslims being hauled over the coals, which is really unfair.
Gadia doesn't get identified with the entire Hindu community, but a Muslim extremist gets identified with the whole Muslim community. That's unfair and wrong.
Yeah.
What about another issue? The Rajinder Sachar committee brought out, for the first time for many people, the extent of deprivation that Muslims in India live with. Do they need reservations, just as you have for Dalits or OBCs or scheduled tribes?
Tricky. I'll pass that question.
Is that because it's an answer you don't know, or because you suspect it's political and therefore awkward?
Because I really don't know the answer. I don't know the answer because, affirmative action is definitely important, but whether it will be solved by reservations, I'm not very sure about that.
People sometimes say, and you've echoed this without saying it in the same way, that Muslims have begun to retreat into their shells, sometimes even into ghettos, that they need to come out and play a fuller role. And just as much
but the situation is not as dismal as you're making it out to be, because on the one hand this is happening, on the other hand there is a resurgence of the moderate liberal voice, which is now taking on the affairs of its community, which it hadn't done in the past. And because of that, I think there is also confidence building. It's not all black and bleak.
Then how do you square up the fact that there is this resurgence, and that is the positive side, as you say, and yet a Shabana Azmi, a Javed Akhtar or a Saif Ali Khan can't get a flat in India's most cosmopolitan city?
Yeah, but if I were to see that as an indication of everything that is wrong, is not correct. Because look at the possibilities for what Muslims
black
have.
And the white.
But just exactly that. You have a president, you have a cricketer, you have the Khans ruling the film industry. So there are both these contradictions. India is a country of contradictions.
So as you look to the future, are you an optimist who sees the situation getting better, or do you fear that things could still get worse before the improvement comes?
I am by nature an optimist, and I can see within Muslims a real hard look at themselves. I think they are making very important attempts to be seen. Like, for instance, this rally against terrorism that the Muslims had was huge. Now that comes from understanding that we need to change the image
and
of
the
our
Deoband
religion.
Fatwa was another example.
Huge. No, so these things are happening. So we have to look at them positively.
So you're a positivist, you're
Yes.
an optimist.
Yeah.
Shabana Azmi, a pleasure talking to you. I'm Devil's Advocate.
Okay, thank you.